A woman planted a dragon's tooth inside her mouth. She even carved a hole into the tooth to raise a bug. When the bug matured, it would fuse with her body. She did all of this just to gain immense power, to avenge her husband. Her husband had died inside the mouth of that very dragon. It was once a proud, ancient dragon, but had since become a war tool exploited by humans. It turned out that the dragon had signed a contract with a certain country, promising to become the nation's guardian deity. When the country was in grave danger, it would appear in the sky, striking the enemy with terrifying precision, and instantly turning the tide of battle. The dragon had only one request for the nation: to assign suitable humans to clean its teeth. These humans were known as the dragon's dentists. They were all people who had died and been brought back to life, because the dragon's teeth were the source of its power, and also its only weakness, deep within the hard-to-reach recesses of its jaws. A swarm of cavity bacteria nested and ran rampant. Trained dentists had to eliminate these cavity bacteria in time, and so, a symbiotic relationship between humans and dragons was formed. One day, while on the job, Nonoko noticed a massive number of cavity bacteria converging in one direction. This was a strange phenomenon that only occurred during the annual return from the land of the dead. Nonoko had rarely seen anything like it before. When she arrived at the source, she discovered a boy being consumed by the cavity bacteria. Nonoko rescued the boy, and, strangely, the cavity bacteria vanished as well. The dentists immediately called an emergency meeting, because the boy had emerged from the dragon's tooth. This kind of phenomenon was known among dentists as a returnee from the land of the dead. Captain Gata declared this a sign of coming disaster. Before a massive calamity, the dragon would recall the dead, and one of them would appear from its tooth and return to life. In other words, the boy had already died once, and he seemed to be a military officer from the enemy nation. As the group debated how to deal with the boy, he suddenly regained consciousness. He tried to threaten them with a gun, but Nonoko quickly subdued and tied him up. Soon after, the military arrived, demanding the prisoner be handed over for intelligence extraction, but Gata knew full well that no one ever survived once they fell into military hands. So Gata used the fact that the boy had revived in the dragon's tooth as justification to keep him under their custody. Gata assigned Nonoko to be his mentor and teach him how to clean the dragon's teeth. But Barunaru had lost all hope of living. He had lost his parents to war as a child, and after joining the military, was betrayed by his closest friend and died on the battlefield. Though now brought back to life, he had become a prisoner of the enemy. Shabana, standing nearby, told him that now that he was alive again, he had to make a choice: either fight until death, or eat a rice ball and face tomorrow. That, she said, was the true resolve of a soldier. Shabana's words reignited Barunaru's spirit. He began devouring the rice balls, ready to embrace a new beginning. However, on his very first day at work, everything went wrong. Though a trained soldier, he was terrified of small bugs, and ended up being chased around by the cavity bacteria. Eventually, he was rescued by a team of dentists. The dentists worked in perfect coordination, swiftly eliminating the cavity bacteria, while Barunaru sat alone in a corner, dazed. The other dentists called him over to help clean up debris. Deep within the dragon's tartar, Barunaru discovered clothing from his own country. Nonoko told him that strange items with unknown origins appeared here every day, but no one knew where the dragon brought them from. Nonoko also showed him the plaque bugs living on the dragon's teeth. These creatures were even harder to remove than barnacles on a whale's back, but when Nonoko touched them, she could hear beautiful sounds. With Nonoko's guidance, Barunaru tried touching them too, but as he listened, tears streamed down his face, because the sounds he heard were the voices of the dead calling out. He was convinced that there was a mysterious link between the dragon's teeth and the land of the dead. For some reason, he suddenly thought of his parents. Perhaps, in his heart, their longing too was hidden inside the dragon's teeth. When Nonoko saw the loneliness in Barunaru's eyes, she couldn't help but fall into her own memories. Nonoko was also born from within the dragon's tooth. From the moment she came into this world, she was destined to become a dragon's dentist. But to become a true dentist, one had to undergo a trial. When they entered the trial grounds, the participants would see the scene, location, and cause of their own death. Many couldn't accept it. They tried to change their fate within the world of the dragon's tooth, but doing so meant failing the trial. and being trapped in that terrifying illusion forever. But the carefree Nonoko, when faced with her own death scene, showed no fear whatsoever. She even struck up a conversation with the person who would eventually kill her. In the end, she became the only human to walk out of the trial alive. An old dentist once told her, "The dragon only needs those who have the courage to face death head-on." Only such people could survive on the dragon's body. Nonoko's presence brought a flicker of light into Barunaru's dark life. Barunaru couldn't understand why Nonoko was always so optimistic. Nor could he comprehend why all the dentists here so calmly accepted their fate. Did they really intend to spend the rest of their lives working here? This was what Barunaru found hardest to accept. During his training to become a dentist, Barunaru gradually became part of this big family. He shared meals and shifts with Nonoko, fought off pests and captured cavity bacteria side by side. Nonoko's optimism began to rub off on him, and Barunaru no longer felt the same hatred toward the world as he once did. However, the peaceful life did not last long. One day, while they were working, the dragon's tooth suddenly cracked, and a black, unknown fluid burst out, completely engulfing Nonoko. Barunaru tried to save her, but deep within the dragon's tooth, a tengu worm suddenly appeared. This creature fed on humans. It was the greatest nemesis of all dentists. The last time they emerged, an entire squad of dentists had been wiped out. Now, everyone had to proceed with extreme caution. The tengu worm was incredibly cunning, able to move freely between the dragon's teeth. Everyone coordinated their attacks, cutting off the creature's escape routes. But unexpectedly, the tengu worm leapt onto the dragon's body and began wreaking havoc. Rushing toward the battleship mounted on the dragon's back, the army's firearms were useless against it. Only the dentist's dragon-powered weapons could kill it. They formed a barrier, constantly shrinking the tengu worm's area of movement, while emergency crews responded at the source of the black fluid. However, Shabana, who had succeeded in killing a tengu worm last time, failed this time, and the barrier was torn open by the creature. The tengu worm broke free and charged straight at Nonoko. At the critical moment, their teammate Yuta hurled his weapon to save her, but became the next target himself. In that instant, time seemed to freeze. Yuta had once seen the scene of his death during the trial, and now that scene had come true. The only thing he could do was crush the poison capsule in his hand to give his teammates a shot at victory. The tengu worm, poisoned, began to slow, and with the team's combined assault, it was finally slain. But the price of that victory was Yuta's life. Yet death was a normal part of life for dentists. Even in the face of a teammate's death, they wouldn't shed a single tear. Yuta's body would be left to be devoured by the bugs on the dragon's tooth, and they would raise a toast to celebrate that Yuta had fulfilled his duty as a dentist. Barunaru couldn't accept their ways. He smashed the wine cup on the ground and turned away. That night, Barunaru asked Nonoko why they treated their fallen comrades that way. Nonoko explained that every dentist had gone through a trial. Only those who passed and earned the dragon's recognition could become dentists, and every dentist knew when they would die, because each of them had seen their own death during the trial. Nonoko had seen the scene of her own death too, but she wasn't afraid, because that was the fate of a dentist. In the middle of the night, Captain Gado suddenly pointed his weapon at Shabana. He had found evidence near the damaged dragon tooth, proof that she had secretly kept a tengu worm larva. Realizing she had been exposed, Shabana no longer tried to hide it. She had long since implanted a dragon tooth into her own mouth, and she had raised a tengu worm on that very tooth. The reason she did this was to save her husband, who had died inside the dragon's tooth, and more importantly, to defy the fate the dragon had set for her. Knowing the date of death wasn't scary in itself. What was terrifying was the wait leading up to it. As the most powerful warrior among the dentists, Shabana now chose to betray the dragon, merging with the tengu worm, and becoming a monster. She launched her plan for revenge. Shabana flew at lightning speed toward the dragon's tooth. If she could destroy it, the dragon's power would be greatly weakened. At the critical moment, Gata moved to stop her. With the help of their teammates, Gata barely managed to sever one of her arms. Outnumbered and overwhelmed, Shabana chose to flee. But after this second round of damage, the dragon's tooth finally began to come loose. Barunaru tried to catch the rope Nonoko tossed him, but he was just a second too late. The dragon's tooth came crashing down, and the two of them couldn't escape in time, falling toward the ground with it. Amazingly, They weren't hurt upon landing. It turned out the floating dragon tooth had cushioned their fall, but the question now was, how could they return this massive tooth to the dragon floating in the sky? While everyone was at a loss, the dragon tooth began to crack open, revealing its core, and the direction it pointed was exactly where the dragon's true body was. Just as they lifted the dragon tooth, enemy forces arrived, and leading them was none other than Buranko, the very man who had killed Barunaru in the past. Right then, friendly forces also showed up, but it was as if Buranko were blessed by the gods. Bullets couldn't harm him at all. In the end, Buranko seized the dragon tooth, intending to board the dragon and destroy it, but what they didn't know was, the dragon's condition had worsened rapidly after losing a tooth, and cavity bacteria were now spreading uncontrollably inside its mouth. Meanwhile, Nonoko and Barunaru were secretly hiding on a wing, preparing to reclaim the dragon tooth. They broke into the aircraft, and Nonoko quickly snatched the tooth and leapt from the aircraft. As she fell, she was rescued by the returning Shabana. It turned out that Shabana had struck a deal with Buranko. She wanted to return to the dragon's body, just to save her dead husband. While Buranko was after the treasure hidden within the dragon, they made it onto the dragon, and thanks to Buranko's immortal body, none of the attacks could harm him. They easily broke through the defenses. At this moment, Barunaru threw a dragon-powered weapon to Nonoko. With a burst of immense power, Nonoko instantly took back the dragon tooth. The fierce battle caused the aircraft to spiral out of control and explode. But Buranko still survived. He led his remaining soldiers to eliminate the officers aboard the dragon-mounted warship, and then broke into the dragon palace, a place normal people couldn't enter. Buranko slaughtered all the monks inside the palace. Here is sealed the wisdom tooth of the giant dragon, which serves as the bond between dragons and humans. No matter how hard Barunaru tried, he couldn't break the barrier. Shabana also reunited with her old comrades. She believed that the dragon's tooth could lead to the land of the dead. If someone could return from there, then so could her husband. God had tried to stop her, but it was too late. Shabana had already entered the world within the dragon tooth. There, she relived the days spent with her beloved. At the moment of a group photo, she broke down in tears. She rushed to kiss her husband, but when she came to her senses, she realized it had all been an illusion. Only then did she understand the dead could never truly return. Her husband's face twisted and lunged out of the picture, transforming into a one-eyed monster. In the end, Shabana was swallowed by the abyss. At the same time, the dragon was in agony, tortured by the infection in its teeth. The cavity bacteria were expanding rapidly, growing larger and larger, until the dragon finally crashed down at the center of the battlefield between the two nations. The enemy soldiers cheered, for it was the first time they'd seen the dragon fall. According to legend, a great treasure was hidden within the dragon's palace. Whoever obtained it could rule the world. But right now, the cavity bacteria had erupted in full force. Countless red tendrils shot into the sky, turning the entire battlefield crimson. The death godlike cavity bacteria reaped lives without mercy. Any human with killing intent had their souls devoured, while those without malice were spared. On the dragon's back, Nonoko and Barunaru watched in horror. They resolved to stop the disaster. The dragon tooth in Nonoko's hand might be the key to saving everything, but the task of reinstalling it could only be done by her, because Barunaru had a more important mission: to stop Buranko, who had already obtained the dragon's wisdom tooth. Barunaru was nothing more than a timid boy on the battlefield, someone Buranko didn't even see as a threat. But Buranko kept taunting him, trying to provoke a reaction. Eventually, Buranko was enraged and attempted to kill him, but the moment he pulled the trigger, the cavity bacteria consumed him. Yet in his final second, Buranko managed to fire and killed Barunaru. At the same time, Nonoko arrived at the source of the cavity bacteria outbreak with the dragon tooth. Gadu slashed through the core of the infection, rescuing Shabana from within the mass. Nonoko immediately reinstalled the dragon tooth into the dragon's mouth. Without its power source, the cavity bacteria disintegrated instantly. It was finally over, but their fallen comrades would never return. The reclaimed wisdom tooth was sealed away once more, and the dragon, reborn, soared into the sky again. This anime explores many profound themes: the reflection on war, the meaning of life and death, loyalty and betrayal, and the true essence of being alive. I admire Nonoko's optimistic view of life. And I respect Shabana's determination to defy fate, even turning herself into a monster for the chance to revive her husband. Since the world never truly abandoned you, perhaps it's worth trying to embrace it in return.